one of my great pleasures. I've been looking forward to this ever since Laurie said yes, she would do it. To really work and interview and listen to Laurie Todd, who is the insurance warrior. Laurie has just released a new book called Approved. You can get it at theinsurancewarrior.com, I believe is the right way to do it. Those of you in Walnut Creek can get this right now, and those of you here will be able to get it as well. Gary and I actually first worked with Laurie, I'm going to think we were doing it in 2009, to when we were starting to work on PRT info and how to get people to get paid on going overseas for therapy. And many of us, including myself, were successful. Laurie will probably mention that in a few moments. But I really wanted to thank Laurie for the work she's done on behalf of all patients, and especially net patients in our group. I know the group in Walnut Creek that is watching this as well. I went sideways and started calculating how many surgeries, how many out of network coverages we've gotten, how many PRTs we were able to cover, and in just my group alone, the work that you've done with your two books and now with this new one has saved us or has gotten us covered for about at least over $1 million. And it's hard. 2 months ago at our meeting in Walnut Creek, one of our members came in and sat down, and he stood up and said, when he was telling what had gone on with him, that 10 days before he had a surgery at UCSF, and the surgery and he was doing great, and the surgery was only made possible because he used the information in your book, in our help, to actually work on an appeal document, an appeal strategy to get his managed care provider to pay for surgery at UCSF. And so I'm really looking forward. I've read the book. Since the time you wrote the first book, things have changed, and it will be very interesting to hear how the things have changed. I highly recommend it, and without further ado, I want to introduce Laurie Todd.
When I was younger, do you think I sat around and said, I want to fight insurance companies when I grow up? I didn't go looking for this work. It came and found me. In March 2005, I was diagnosed with late-stage appendix cancer, rushed into surgery, and given months to live. Because I had an unusual cancer, I was sent to the chief of oncology at my HMO. I said, so I have appendix cancer. What's the treatment for that? He said, there is no treatment for your disease, and even if there were, they wouldn't pay for it. Didn't take me long to find the tried and proven treatment for my disease: cytoreductive surgery and hyperthermic intraperitoneal chemotherapy. It's just that it was out of network, and so my insurance company denied it. I had no out-of-network coverage. Was that going to stop me? Was I going to die because my insurance company didn't want to pay for it? People said, oh, you had such a burning desire to live. And I said, no, I had a burning desire not to be the world's biggest chump. For 2 months, I read, studied, gathered proof. I spent 2 days sitting on the floor of the Bellevue Library, reading through an entire shelf of Washington insurance regulations. 3 days after receiving my 23-page war documents, the HMO called me. Well, we decided to pay for it. I had the cheesiest, crummiest, catastrophic individual plan with a $6,000 deductible and a $15,000 out-of-pocket max. On October 4th, 2005, I traveled to Washington, D.C. for my cytoreductive surgery. It took my expert surgeon 14 hours to remove all the tumor that they'd missed here in Washington. Then I hit the jackpot of complications and spent 43 days in the hospital. The bill was $347,000. I must have scared my insurer pretty badly because they paid the whole thing. They paid my deductible, my out-of-pocket. My whole cash outlay for 2005 was $9. As a matter of fact, I got a bill from the hospital in DC a year after my surgery. It was for $9. So being me, of course, I called them up. So what's the $9 for? She said, it's because you had a glass of juice in the hospital. I said, okay, I'm a big spender. I'll send you a check for $9 today. When it comes to insurance, all things are possible. In 1970, the average lifetime medical expenses for one person were about $2 million. Those same medical treatments today would cost approximately $38 million. No insurer, no employer, no government entity can afford to spend $38 million on you. None of us in this room will get through this lifetime without running up against something your insurer doesn't want to pay for. And it will be very, very expensive and probably life-saving. What are you going to do? What will you do? You're going to write an appeal. And you're very likely to win it if you just remember three things. Number one, you, patient, are the only one who has any power over your insurance company. Number two, more important than what you say in the appeal is who you send it to. The most important thing about any appeal is who you send it to. Number three, when it comes to your appeal, don't say the things that are important to you. You need to say the things that are most persuasive to your insurance company. So where do we start? We always start with the fact that no appeal was ever meant to lead to an approval. It's not a good faith process. So if that's the case, then what do? We completely understand the insurance company's processes, and then we do exactly the opposite. When people get denied, what they usually do is they call the doctor's office. People on these support groups often even say, my doctor's going to win my appeal. My doctor's appealing it for me. Your two doctors even suggested that. Let your doctor appeal it. Well, back in the 1960s, your doctor was independent of the insurance company. He was ideally positioned to fight the insurer on your behalf. Times have changed. They changed a long time ago. As of about 1970, the first thing your doctor does when he graduates from his training is he signs contracts with the major insurance companies. He's now in network. He can take your insurance card. In other words, the doctor is bound by contract to the insurance company. The insurance company can reward him. They can punish him. As a matter of fact, they can fire him. If they cancel your doctor's contract, he won't have any patience. He won't have any patience. Doctors cannot win these battles for us anymore. As a matter of fact, they shouldn't be winning them. They have better things to do, like save our lives. When I found the treatment for my cancer all these years ago, I always assumed that it was my surgeon's job to save my life. And it was my job to make them pay for it. Period. So we come to I've said how important it is who you send your appeal to. That's my number two. Why would the insurance company like you to send your appeal? The appeals department. And what is the appeals department? It's a post office box. Every appeals department of every insurance company in the United States is a post office box. What does that tell you? It's not a good faith process. You can't call a post office box on the phone. You can't reason with a post office box. You can't march up and down with a sign in front of the post office box. Remember what I told you about doing the opposite of what they would like you to do? What is the opposite of sending it to the post office box? There, bingo. Send it to the CEO of the parent company directly. Not only that, you're going to take it to the nth degree because you don't know if he'll take any action. You're going to send it to 20 top decision makers at the insurance plan. It's an all-out attack. You're going to get their email addresses, their personal office phone numbers. You're going to find out who they are, where they are. You're going to make build an org chart for your insurance plan. You know why? Because they don't want you to have access. Why? Because access is power. Now, I had somebody once upon a time call me out and say, but I called the insurance company. They wouldn't tell me the president's phone number. Well, no, they don't want us to find them. Do you really think that the actual decision makers at the insurance company want 20,000 disgruntled patients calling them on the phone? So how do you get their info? Search. Google. Google like crazy. Access is so important that I will spend 3 or 4 hours looking for one phone number for one key person. And then I call all my phone numbers late at night to see whose voice is on there. I also, emails are much easier. You know why? Because most companies configure all their emails the same way. Your first name dot last name or whatever. They really make it too easy for me. And then you send a little test email to all your 20 people. You'll send it to the CEO of the parent company. You'll send it to the chief medical officer. He's the guy in charge of all clinical happenings at the insurance company. I don't send any appeal to anyone below a vice president. That's how important we are. Now, what if you only send it to people who work for the insurance company? It's not a good faith process. If you just send it to people who work there, maybe they'll just deny it again and no one will ever know. So you have to send it to a few carefully chosen outside eyes. I call them the outside eyes to keep them honest. Now when it comes to outside eyes, you have to send it to the right people and not to the wrong people. If you CC Oprah Winfrey and the President of the United States, they're going to know you just fell off the turnip truck. You have to send it to the right people. The quickest and dirtiest way to find a right person to send it to outside is their board of directors. People get paid a lot of money to be on the board of directors of health insurers. Maybe $10,000 to $100,000. If they're on there, guess what? They know somebody high up at the insurance company. They play golf with the CEO or whatever, but they don't actually work there. Their paycheck does not depend on them upholding a denial. So I always will look up, as part of my job, I look up the board of directors, and they're usually proud of them. They list them on their annual report, and I go shopping. I'm looking for, I like public interest attorneys. I love presidents of universities. I'm not looking for Goldman Sachs kind of money people or someone who just got done working for an insurance company. I choose my guy, get his info, and then the insurance company knows that you're smart enough to put him on there too. So that is what we do. Now, how many of you have insurance through your employer? About half of you. A critical thing for you to know when it comes to addressing your appeal is your plan a self-funded plan? Over 80% of the employer plans in the U.S. these days are self-funded plans. Does anyone have any idea what a self-funded plan means? Here, tell me.
Well, your company is responsible for the claims.
That's a way of saying it, yes, A+. What it means is that if you're in a self-funded employer plan, which most employees are, the insurance company is no longer insuring you. The insurance company is not paying for any of your medical treatments. It's your employer who's paying. All your medical visits, surgeries, vaccinations, your employer is paying for. And very few people know that because I don't think employers are that comfortable with that position. What it means is that your employer is financially at risk, and so your employer is the final decision maker on all medical treatments. Hello, your employer gets to decide if your child gets brain surgery. So if you just fight your appeal through the insurance company with a self-funded plan, you're kind of missing the boat. You also have to understand that your employer is going to make that decision. Very simple. Just send a copy of your appeal to the CEO, send another copy to the highest VP of HR. It gives them a little subtle notice that you understand that they're involved. So that's the self-funded plan. So here's what we do. I build my beautiful addressee list. We have our 20 names, all of our things. I've written my 23 or 45-page master's thesis document. And then over the weekend, I'm training my helpee, I call them my helpees, I'm training them how to do the phones. If you just send the doggone thing, you're not going to win. And if you do, it'll be 3 months from now. The phones are crucial. So I'm training them, I'm teaching them, we're practicing. And then on the Monday morning at 9 a.m., I call my helpee and I put them on the phones with the highest level decision makers. And after each phone call, they report back to me, tell me what they said, and we plan our next move. So they say, "Hi, Jane Smith here. Just calling to see if you've received my urgent expedited appeal." "You have? Tell me, how's it coming along?" And what if she says, "Well, he really doesn't have anything to do with that." And you say, "I'd really appreciate it if you would have a look at it." What if she says, "Why don't you just give us your phone number and we'll call you?" "I really don't want to miss your call. How about if I check back with you in an hour and see how it's coming along?" You see what it is? It's a tug of war. It's a control game. It's a chess match. We call. Last week, we sent the award documents on Sunday, we worked our phones on Monday, and we won on Tuesday morning. Wow. That's standard for me. Not only is winning quickly what you can win quickly, but it's a strategy. Speed is a strategy with insurance companies. Because the longer you give an insurance company to chew on something, the more ways they're going to find to not pay for it. They'll turn it into a dry administrative decision. Nobody can draw drama is drained from it. Push. Get them to approve it immediately before they know what hit them. Now, you need to know what you need to say in your appeal. Because people tend to say the things that are important to them. But the insurance company doesn't care if we need a treatment. They don't care if our doctor says we need a treatment. They don't care if it's the only treatment that's going to save our lives. The only question that any insurer ever cares about when deciding whether to pay or not, are we required to pay for this per the terms of your contract? Every appeal is a contractual dispute to them. So no matter what the issue, whether it's denied as experimental, it's not medically necessary, it's out of network, you have to prove to them in at least a half dozen ways that they need to pay for it per the terms of your contract. And your contract includes everything that the insurance company ever put on paper. Their definitions, your benefits book, the denial letter, their coverage policy. I love that stuff. The more words they put down, the more I have to take issue with. So what does an appeal actually look like? The first page, what's the most important thing? Who you send it to. So the first page is a beautiful accounting of all the people who are getting it. What if they only read the first page? If they see everybody that I found and who's getting it, just that first page might encourage them to pay for it. How did they find these people? Do they work here? Oh my gosh, my boss is getting it. My boss's boss is getting it. Maybe I better do something. I call it poking the stick in the hornet's nest. Now, that first page makes them swarm. And I don't care what direction they're swarming in, I'll manage it. Just get them swarming. The second page is your inflammatory table of contents. You thought a table of contents was to say what pages things are on. That's your second page. The table of contents is like screaming headlines from the National Enquirer. If that doesn't make them want to pay, it will encourage them to read further. In-network doctors show lack of knowledge. This treatment is medically necessary per plan definition. 346 cases of precedent. Oh my God. That's your table of contents. Then what comes next? What comes next is the heart of your appeal. Nobody realizes that you have to tell your story in there. Not because they care, but because it can be very persuasive to the insurance company. How's that work? I call it the bad medical story. We all have one. The bad medical story is all the mistakes they made. The misdiagnosis, the bad advice, the wrong drugs, they almost killed you in the hospital, they cut off the wrong foot. Somebody once asked me, why does the insurance company care if all these doctors made mistakes? I say, because to an insurance company, doctors are not doctors. To an insurance company, in-network doctors are agents of the insurance company. And when they make mistakes and do things wrong, it's very embarrassing to the insurance company. You're not going to point the finger. You're not going to complain about it. You're not going to get emotional. Just tell it. With the goal that when they get to the end of your bad medical story, they'll say, holy Moses, I don't think we want anyone else to see this. Maybe we better just pay for it. It's the heart of your appeal. It's the most persuasive part. So then, what comes next? What comes next is the science. People think they're being really smart if they go look up a few scientific articles and attach them to their appeal. Why do we not attach scientific articles to appeal? Why don't we do that?
Nobody reads.
They're not going to read them.
Debatable.
They're not going to read them. They're not even going to open them. They're not going to read them. So science is crucial, not because they care about it, but because they can't ignore it. And so what do? In about 2009, I learned to read the articles myself. If it was a new treatment I was writing, read them myself with my little stubby pencil and my highlighter and all that. By the time I got done reading them, I sounded really dangerous, really knowledgeable. The person reading it might say, well, does she work here? Or is she a scientist? Is she a doctor? What is she? And so, you get the scientific articles, read them, and then just pull out the best gold nuggets to drop into your appeal. As in, overall survival statistics improved, this treatment is standard of care for the disease. Pull them out and drop the quote right into your appeal. Easy peasy. So what's the next section? The next section is what I call precedent. So what is precedent?
It's happened before.
Other times they covered it.
Right. Precedent is other cases where they paid for it before. This is the most powerful kind of proof that they need to pay for it per the terms of the contract. If lots of other people had the same kind of contract you did, and they paid for it before, it's some powerful evidence that they need to pay for it again. And people say, well, where do I get that precedent? I'm going to call my doctor. No, don't ask your doctor to tell you about their other medical cases. That's a HIPAA violation. How do we find those cases of precedent? Networking and searching. Now, you go on your patient support group, you start asking around, you might even put out the call. Say, hey, I've got such and such a thing I need to get. Have you had it paid for? Then you get their information and you start building your little list. I have searched and searched for precedent in the past. You can Google. You're going to find blogs of people who have this disease, videos, newspaper articles. Go find the people and get their information. I had one case I was fighting years ago. It was in San Francisco, and it was for brain surgery. The person wanted to get out of Kaiser to get surgery with an actual expert brain surgeon. And so there's a story there. And so I needed a case of precedent. And there was no support group about this. So I started Googling. And I found a newspaper article from 8 years before in the San Francisco Chronicle. It was one gal who had the same kind of brain tumor. She went to the same Kaiser medical center. She had gone to the same expert surgeon at UCSF, and they had paid for it. So I contacted the author of the article, and I said, is she still around? Can you find these people? And she did. And I got the information, and this was my gold nugget of precedent. You know, leave no stone unturned when it comes to looking for precedent. I've been building, nobody pays me to do this, but I've been building a precedent list for cytoreductive surgery and IPEC for 13 years. I have 267 cases where insurers have paid for this. Every HMO, out of network, 176 Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies, every disease you can think of for this surgery. And so I can tailor it. I have precedent to suit the appeal. Don't neglect the precedent. Now the last section is where I prove medical necessity. We're going to have to get into, like, what does this mean, medical necessity? Even if they don't deny it as not medically necessary, even if they don't mention medical necessity, I'm going to prove medical necessity. Why? Because I don't want them to come back on me and say, oh yeah, but it's not medically necessary. So I'm being a little proactive here. So let's talk about what does medical necessity mean? Any ideas?
Whatever they say it means.
Oh, it's perfect. A plus.
I think you've read the book.
A plus.
Okay.
You read the book. See, it doesn't. People think medical necessity means clinically appropriate. My doctor says I need it. I need it medically. But in a insurance context, medical necessity is not a medical word. It's a legal term. It means whatever they say it means. In other words, let's say you want to prove medical necessity, or they deny your treatment as not medically necessary. The first thing you do is go look up your insurance company's definition of medical necessity. Easy peasy. You're going to quote the whole thing in your appeal, and you're going to prove point by point that your treatment meets their requirements to be considered medically necessary. And then the title of that section is, this treatment is medically necessary per plan definition. So there. Now, it's the same sort of scenario with the word experimental. People think experimental means not enough randomized trials, not FDA approved, no professional consensus, it's too new. It doesn't mean any of those things. And if you try and prove those things in your appeal, you're barking up the wrong tree. Experimental simply means whatever they say it means. Take their definition of experimental, prove point by point that your treatment is not experimental, and then the title, this treatment is not experimental per plan definition. Now these definitions are meant to could cause shock and awe, right? They're like got A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Don't fear, just work your way through them. And then, there's really nothing much they can say about that. Now, are there any medical professionals among you at this point? Even if there aren't, I think you guys need to know it too. We're going to talk about the peer-to-peer review. In my book, I said, according to Josh, I said, I've never seen a peer-to-peer review reverse a denial. And Josh said to me, that's not true. In my case, the peer-to-peer review reversed the denial. But he went on to say, but that's because from you I knew that I needed to educate my doctor before the peer review happened. If you just let your doctor just talk to this person from the insurance company, now mind you, I digress. Insurance words always mean the opposite of what they appear to mean. So a peer review, it's not a peer, and it's not a Review. It's going to be a doctor who works at the insurance company. Doctors, 99% of doctors who work at insurance companies are primary care physicians. Why do you suppose that is? Because if they actually knew anything about any of these treatments, they might want to approve them. They're there to be called, they give them the title medical director. Insurance words always mean the opposite. They don't direct anything. They're peons. There are hundreds of them. One time, actually, when I write these appeals, I don't write them as me, because the insurance company doesn't care how smart I am. I write them as the patient. I'm just the ghostwriter. And so I get to hear all the compliments, through my helpee. So one time the helpee comes back and says, this medical director called me, and he said, wow, that's the best appeal. How did you ever write that appeal? It's fantastic. But I have to tell you, you're going to get another denial from me, because I do not have the power to reverse denials. I'm only a medical director. I only have the power to explain the insurance company's position. You're talking to a peon. So if you want to help your doctor to actually reverse one of these things, what you need to do is you need to give him a copy of your insurer's coverage policy for that treatment. Most people don't even know these exist. Every insurance company has a body of, they call them medical policy statements or coverage policies for maybe 100 or 200 expensive treatments. This is their line in the sand. This is where they give all their justification for not having to pay for it, all their rationale and reasons why they shouldn't have to cover it, and then they list a whole lot of scientific articles at the end. They're usually available online. Like, for instance, if your insurance company is Anthem, just type in Anthem medical policies. You can search them. Find PRRT, find this, find that. And that's the only leg they have to stand on. When you get a denial letter, it's going to say in there, per our medical policy number such and such. You gotta beat that. You gotta beat that thing to death. Because I have learned with all different treatments that most of these are sham documents. They're sham documents. If you actually read the scientific articles that are attached to them, they don't say what they say they say. They make it up as they go along. It's really easy to just demolish them. So say, like I can do this with my own expert surgeon, because honor of honors, we've developed kind of a collegial relationship over the years. And I can say, hey, I got a case going on, going to be a peer review, I'm going to send over the medical policy and you can go ahead and demolish it. Which they do, and then you win. So, if you take on your own appeal and don't try to count on your doctor to do it, if you build a powerful addressee list and send it to all of them and call them the next day to make them make their decision, if you say things that are persuasive to the insurance company, you will win your appeal quickly and decisively. Now, if you had told me 13 years ago that I would be doing 204 more insurance appeals, I would have said, just take me out and shoot me. But I've grown into this work. I've developed broad shoulders for these terrible battles where life hangs in the balance. I've learned that I'm a lion of courage, that I'm not afraid of anyone, and that I'm smarter than most of these idiots earning $20 million at the insurance company. These are really good things to know. Now, life is short. If this were really about insurance, I wouldn't spend 5 minutes of my precious time on it. This is not about insurance. It's about life. It's about dignity. It's about grace. It's about winning a strategy game with the highest possible stakes and then helping others to do the same. In every one of my 205 cases, the insurers were determined not to pay for it. It's experimental. It's not medically necessary. It's not a covered benefit. If I had believed them, I wouldn't have won any of them. But I knew that when an insurance company says something, it's not the law. It's just what they say. And then what we say is more truthful, more factual, more eloquent, and far more powerful than anything that they could ever say. Thank you.
Yeah, you can leave it down, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So, a few questions that I have for you, and we'll open it up to a few questions, because
Okay.
I'm sure there are some. One of the things that I noted in your new book, and reading it against the old book, and you even brought it up, is that this has really changed in the last few years from being about whether it was medically necessary or beating a denial to now beating an approval. And can you explain that a little bit? Because I thought that was fascinating.
Well, I guess maybe I don't see it quite that way, but it has changed over the last 13 years, fighting insurance companies. With each appeal, of course, it gets a little harder. They ramp up their game and I ramp up my game. But 13, maybe up until I would say maybe 2012, most of the cases that I was fighting were denials. It's experimental, it's not medically necessary. And then this is just my trying to figure it out, but I think it's too easy to fight a denial. You just prove that it is experimental, and it's not that it is not experimental, and it is medically necessary. And when they deny it, they have to go through all the process of entertaining appeals and doing all this. So in about 2012, I saw them starting to shift to a different way of saving money, a different way of shifting the costs to the patient or the doctor. And that way had more to do with manipulating their networks. In other words, we make the network smaller. More treatments in medical centers are going to then be out of network. And that brings us to the case, well, but I have out-of-network coverage. And so, to me, out-of-network, that's a PPO. You pay more for it. Your premiums are higher. Probably maybe even your deductibles are higher. But for me, out-of-network coverage is really an illusion. If you would go and get a really expensive treatment out-of-network, you're going to pay most of it yourself. They have it rigged to where they'll pay a percentage of their own reasonable and customary amount, this and that. On a typical $30,000 surgery fee, a typical reimbursement would be about $900. And you'll pay the $29,100 because there's no contract and they're out-of-network. So what are we going to do? In about 2012, I was talking to my expert surgeon's office, and I said, we have to do something about these out-of-network approvals because the people, they're no good. And his office gal said, well, you can't appeal it because they didn't deny it. That's the game, right? Now they don't have to even entertain appeals. They just approve it out-of-network, hardly pay anything, and they're off scot-free. So I said, let me think about that. I'm going to go off and Google and think and whatnot. And then a perfect case came along. Another surgeon who was out of network for everybody, and a case where we needed to turn that into a single case agreement. And I said, okay, I'm going to try my little ploy. If they don't want an appeal, I'm just not going to call it an appeal. I call it a urgent expedited request for reconsideration.
It's got to be an acronym for that. Yes, keep going.
Yes, it's always urgent. It's a request for this language they understand, but they usually use it for appeals that are like way after the surgery, once you never win. So I just dragged it up into the present and said, request for reconsideration, and I think they're totally bamboozled. I've been appealing approvals ever since. If you're going to get an expensive out-of-network treatment and it's out-of-network, appeal it. Just don't call it an appeal. So almost all the appeals that I do nowadays are people who need to get out-of-network for surgery, for expensive treatments, all that sort of thing. Yeah, that's the main thing that's changed.
Any quick questions before we close the stream?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
What's the value of the insurance commissioner's office?
Oh, that's a great question. That's usually the third thing. After the doctor loses your appeal, and after you realize that there aren't any lawyers who do appeals, then they said, well, the insurance commissioner will win my appeal. Now, it does vary state to state. In some states, there might be a brand new insurance commissioner who might be interested. But that's another thing. On these support groups, why don't you call the insurance commissioner? Do you really think that it's the insurance commissioner's job to fight patient appeals? Their job is to, the insurance commissioner's office, their job is to be a repository of state insurance regulations. If you want to look up a state regulation or ask them about it, they can do that. If you need insurance coverage, they might be able to inform you about what's available in your state. Most insurance commissioners just got done working as an executive at an insurance company. I don't even bother with them anymore. Don't bother with them.
One more.
If the insurance commissioner isn't elected,
Right.
there's very little pull that they'll have. Washington has elected California, but a lot of insurance commissioners are appointed by the governor. They would be interested if you were able to show a pattern in practice, but in general, for an isolated appeal, they're not interested. And I would say the same thing with the Department of Labor for your employer self-funded.
Well, the DOL, what I like to do with the department, when we have a self-funded plan, it's a long story, but they actually manage to evade all state insurance regulation, and the only body who can help you is the Department of Labor in Washington, D.C. So my quick and easy way of getting some leverage there is I'll look up the local office of the Department of Labor, and on my beautiful first page, I'll have the director of the local office of the Department of Labor. It tells them you're not an idiot. You need to find that person. It's scary to them, even if they aren't going to do anything.
So again, the name of the book is Approved. This is Laurie Todd, the insurance lawyer, and I want to have all of us give her a great round of applause for coming out today. This is really fantastic.